If someone handed you a book and said the main character of this novel is a rock, not The Rock, not Dwayne Johnson, no, a piece of gravel, something you would skip across the pond, would you read it? Well, I did. And honestly, I probably saved you some time. I'm Jimmy Nuts, and today on the Fantasy Network, we're going to be reviewing The Raven Tower by Ann Leckie. Let's get started. So for everything I'm going to say in this review, I will say that the plot and the backbone of this story, The Raven Tower by Ann Leckie, is very interesting. For centuries, the kingdom of Iridan has been protected by the god known as the Raven. He watches over his territory from atop a tower in the powerful port of Vasti. His will is enacted through the Raven's lease, a human ruler chosen by God himself. His magic is sustained via blood sacrifice that every lease must offer, and under the Raven's watch, the city flourishes. But the power of the Raven is weakening. A usurper has claimed the throne, the kingdom's borders are tested by invaders who long for the prosperity that Vasti boasts, and they have made their own alliances with other gods. It is into this unrest that the warrior Elo, aide to Maywet, who is the true lease, arrives. And in seeking to help Maywet reclaim the city, Elo discovers that the Raven Tower holds a secret. Its foundations conceal a dark history that has been waiting to reveal itself, and to set in motion a chain of events that could destroy Iridan forever. Now that sounds pretty interesting, right? And I think the backstory to this book is interesting. It has very Shakespearean themes and seems to be something where maybe the influences from Hamlet. That's kind of what I've got, and that's what I read in some other reviews before I picked up this book. And the reason that I picked up The Raven Tower by Ann Leckie was for the sole fact that I needed something as a one-off to kind of cleanse my palate moving from The Wheel of Time to First Law. They're vastly different, and I just wanted something, a quick win after reading so many of The Wheel of Time. And with that said, it did cleanse my palate, but unfortunately left a very bad taste in my mouth. Now, before I get too negative, I do want to go over some positives with the book. And the first is that Ann Leckie is a fantastic author. She's had a lot of success in the sci-fi genre. She's won Hugo. She's won a bunch of other awards. This is her first take into the fantasy genre. And while it didn't do anything for me, I will say I think that if she were to release another fantasy book, I would potentially read it just based on the fact that she is a great writer. This is a very tightly crafted book. You're not going to see a lot of glaring mistakes. It doesn't feel amateur at all. It feels like a very seasoned writer. I thought the setting of the book, while very simple, was really cool. I thought the landscape was amazing. I thought the map that came with the book was interesting, and kind of the gods that laid in different parts of the land and their influences, and whether they were major gods or little gods, and how that all played into the world was pretty cool. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to get into the things that I didn't like, and boy, oh boy, there was a lot. The characters, while not offensively bad or anything like that, there wasn't a lot of depth to it. In fact, in this book, I usually pick a favorite character, as you know, at the end of every review. I don't have one. I didn't feel like any of the characters really grabbed me. I didn't feel emotionally tied to any of the characters, and for me, I'm okay with a story-driven book and maybe not getting too in-depth with the characters' thoughts, but there just wasn't anything that I could really dig into and anyone I could root for or even cheer against, because it was very mysterious all the way to the end. And that's kind of the theme of this book. It's very tight and it's very simple. It's good storytelling, but there wasn't a lot of risks taken by the author, except that the main character happens to be a god that lives within a rock. Those aren't spoilers. You'll know that within the first few chapters, but that was a weird risk to take. And maybe for people who really enjoy god fantasy and kind of like the deities interacting within the world, maybe this is something that you would enjoy. I'm not opposed to deity fantasy or you know, kind of like theology within my fantasy book, but this just didn't do it for me. Like imagining a rock being pulled on a cart and it being a god and it can't really move by itself because it can, but it doesn't want to. It's just like, what are we doing? About 20% of the way through the book, I finally found some hope because I felt like the human chapters were going to lead to something a little bit more intriguing. Every single time I flipped to a chapter that was talking about the backstory with the gods and the rocks and the snakes and all of these things, it just lost me. I had to really, really struggle and slog through those chapters because it was really hard to connect to, and it felt like it was almost a joke. I don't know. I don't like disliking things I read, but I hated this book. I didn't like it at all. And it was about 80% of the way through. I even tweeted it out like, man, I hope this ending really wraps up well, because if not, I feel like I kind of wasted my time. It's only about 400 or 500 page book, but still, it's quite a few hours. And I read it over vacation. I was gone for 2 weeks and wanted to, bust it out. And I wish I would have just read something else. Because at the end of the day, this book, it's just boring. It's boring. And whenever you hear the main character is a rock, and that's the risk that the author decided to take, and how could you ever care about a rock? How could you give a personality to a rock? She tried her best. She's very talented, but it didn't translate well to me, the reader. I thought that it was pretty stale. When we came to the climax of the book and we came to the ending of the book, I thought the buildup was fine in the last few chapters, but then the book just kind of ends abruptly, and not in a fashion that I thought was epic or even worth the slog through all of the pages. Honestly, the ending was deflating. It felt kind of cheap. I wouldn't even say rushed because I couldn't wait for it to be over. I thought it sucked. Maybe if there had been a little bit more intricacies in the human interaction with the gods, or maybe even if there had been some sort of subplot with other characters and a reason that I care if Maywat gets the throne or not. It wasn't clear if I should be rooting for him. Maybe then I could have given this book a 3 out of 5, or maybe even just enjoyed reading it, but I couldn't wait for it to be over. I will concede that it did cleanse my palate, and that I think if someone is into god fantasy or a deity or anything like that, I think that there's people out there that would enjoy this. So maybe you're really big into Ann Leckie and you just want more from her. I do think that there is an audience for this book, and if you look on Goodreads or any of the other reviews, it goes between 3 or 4 out of 5, and there are some people that say absolutely love it. It's something fresh and new, and she did try something newish with some older tones, but for me, complete miss. But maybe for you, you'll enjoy it. And one of my biggest gripes with the book is that because it's told from a god's perspective, it's in second person. So we, as the reader, are Elo, traveling with Maywat to the city, and I just can't really get behind the second person point of view. There are other books that have had that I've liked, but it's still not my first choice. So right out of the gate, I was kind of put off by that. And then along with the fact that it wasn't really all that interesting or fantastical, just hurt it right from the get-go. There's just not a lot to this book. I would not recommend it. I don't have any interesting quotes from it. I don't have a favorite quote or a favorite character, which should tell you a lot because I get really excited about those portions of the review. So when it comes down to it, The Raven Tower for me gets an unfortunate 2 out of 5. And the only reason why it's not getting a 1, for me, when I do these ratings, I think a 1 is a book, 1, that I would never ever read again. I'm never going to read any of the other authors' work. Like, I have no interest in it at all. It was a waste of time, and barely finished it. With The Raven Tower, I did almost not finish it, but it was so short that I felt like I could just get my way through and maybe we'd have this spectacular ending. No, it could have very easily been a did not finish for me, but for all of these things that I'm saying that are negative, the reason why I gave it a 2 is because it is very well written. It's not an amateur novel. It's not something that I thought was just garbage, like a Terry Goodkind, something like that. But with Ann Leckie, I know she's a great author and she's had success in the sci-fi genre, so I might read Ann Leckie again. I might jump into some of her sci-fi works. I would not read a sequel to this, which thankfully she said that this is a one-off, and that even though the trends in fantasy seem to be, making a trilogy or some sort of series, that this was just a one-time thing. I'm sure she'll probably try to delve into fantasy again. I would be apprehensive. It's certainly not going to jump to the top of my need to read at all, but maybe on a rainy day, and if it was short enough, I would give it another shot. But I could see myself reading her other works because her writing was very well done. This is my first negative review, so I'm kind of interested to see if I get any kind of feedback in the comments of people who maybe did enjoy this book, or maybe you read it and you absolutely hated it. So please let me know down below. I would love to see if maybe I missed something. I don't think I did. Yes, so The Raven Tower, 2 out of 5, and that's it for that, and I'm glad to put it away. Probably going to be donating this book to a library or a used bookstore, because I don't have much room on the shelves right now, and I don't really feel like keeping this because I'll never read it again, and I probably wouldn't recommend it to any of my friends, so it's kind of just a paperweight at this point. So that's it for this video, my first what I would consider to be a negative review, but hopefully you were entertained, and hopefully I saved you some time from reading this book. If you enjoyed the video, hit the thumbs up, hit subscribe, turn on the little bell for notifications. You get a notification every single time that I post a new video here on the channel. And until next time, keep reading, my friends. Man, it would have been so cool if in the book, like, it was just the rock and it wasn't a rock and he comes out of it and just rock bottoms everybody, throws up the people's out. If you smell, man, it would have been, nah, it still would have been terrible.